and welcome to the Where People Meet podcast, the event technology podcast for the worldwide meetings and events industry. I'm your host, Mitch Malinsky, Head of Strategic Partnerships here at Feedloop, and today I'm joined by Mike Allton, Head of Strategic Partnerships at Agorapulse, the #1 rated tool for social media managers to dominate their company's social media strategy by managing things like inboxes, publishing, reporting, monitoring, and team collaboration, all in one easy-to-use yet extremely powerful tool. In addition to his work with Agorapulse, Mike has garnered a large following in the events industry as the host of the Virtual Event Strategist podcast, a weekly newsletter and podcast aimed at helping event planners unlock the true potential of virtual events. He's actively on the road, speaking at events, in person or remote, and sharing his expertise with anyone seeking to learn more and level up. We are incredibly lucky to have someone with the depth and breadth of experience that Mike does on the podcast. So listeners, be sure to listen closely to what he has to say. Mike, thanks for joining us. Where are you calling in from today?
Thanks so much, Mitch. First, I want to really just reiterate how appreciative I am of you for having me on the show. I love having these kinds of conversations. I hope it's super helpful to everybody listening. I'm over in St. Louis where it's incredibly hot right now, like insane, actual heat advisory warnings, like don't go outside, don't even open your door kind of heat.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Well, I love that kind of heat. But yeah, Mike, really excited for this. Thank you for joining us. And let's dive into it. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to get your background. Can you tell everyone in the audience about your background in the meetings and events industry?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you led off by talking about how I work with Agorapulse, because that is my full-time job, and that's how I got started in events and meetings and that sort of thing. I got hired by Agorapulse in 2018 to manage our influencer marketing program. And shortly after I got hired, my boss, the CMO, came to me and said, "Hey, Mike, we need to actually do something with these influencers, not just leave it up to them to decide what they're going to say and when. How about you do a virtual summit?" Okay, sure, I can do a virtual summit. And then I came back to my office and it's like, well, how do I do a virtual summit? Because I'd never done one before. Not the way that he was envisioning it. I had done a lot of live streams. I'd been a big live streamer on Google Plus, Hangouts, and Air for the previous 5 years, Blab, Meerkat, and so on. I'd done panels as live events. I'd done successions of live streams as kind of a virtual event. Not really. Never a full-blown virtual summit. So that's how I got started. And I was exploring using the tools that we had at the time, which were really geared more towards webinars. So my first virtual summit was really a collection of 16 webinars, not a cohesive event that you might register for once. And it was painful. It was painful for me. It was painful for the attendees, but it worked. Even though it was 16 different webinars that you had to register for 16 different times, there were incredible sessions with some of our wonderful influencers in the social media marketing space. And we had over 1,000 people sign up for that event. And so I figured out how to use different platforms. And over the next couple of years, that evolved and revolved around having a single event platform, right? Like a Feedloop, where people could register once, attend all the sessions they wanted to attend, many of them live, some of them pre-recorded. And we got into this rhythm of creating really fantastic events. Fast forward then a couple of years, I'd been doing this. I started to bring on partners and other brands to be sponsors. And when the pandemic hit in 2020, and everybody had to suddenly pivot to going virtual, a lot of those previous partners who had experienced my events, and I'd been doing it right for a couple of years, so my events were now pretty good. I'd like to think that the attendees and the brands, they saw a flawless event. Now, we know as the event organizer, they're never flawless, and we're always paddling like the duck's feet underwater, right? But from their perspective, things were really smooth. The communication was on point. They knew what to do. So when brands like Ecamm And organizations like the Midwest Digital Marketing Conference, which was put on by UMSL here in St. Louis, suddenly needed to put on a virtual event. They turned to me. And they're like, Mike, we know you've got this experience. We were part of your events. We saw that it worked really, really well. What tools did you use? How did you get started? And so that's how I started becoming almost a consultant. And over the next couple of years, this was starting in 2020, now we're into 2022, I had those conversations more and more frequently with other brands outside of Agorapulse. And so that's why I started the podcast. That's why I started to kind of formalize, you know what? I can do that. I can't run an event for somebody else, but I can help them. I can answer questions. I can help them build up strategy. So that's been my journey the past 4 years.
It's an incredible journey. I've had the privilege of following along with it for the past few months. I get a lot of value out of your podcast. It has actually helped to shape how I structure and manage this podcast here. So I've learned a lot from you on that side of things, but also you've got some great content out there for event planners in general. So thank you for what you do. You're really benefiting the industry. I'm benefiting from it, and it's fun content.
I appreciate that. And I would be remiss if I did not give full props at this point to my best friend, Stephanie Liu, who's the one who pushed me to do this. She pushed me to actually, formalize the fact that I offer virtual event strategization and consulting. And she pushed me to create the podcast, which I did in a weekend, and launched that on May the 4th. But the week before, she's like, you really need a podcast. You should be podcasting. You should be sharing this information that way. And so thank you to Stephanie for making me do that.
Amazing. Love it. And what's interesting to me is you were ahead of the curve. A lot of us in the events industry adopted virtual events out of necessity because the pandemic hit and you couldn't do anything but run a virtual event. But it seems you were, you said 2018 is when you started planning virtual events? Yeah.
Like I said, you can, if you want to be technical, you can go back even further than that. But in my mind, when I think about a virtual event and what that looks like, it's 2018, years before the pandemic.
And it's a relatively short period of time, but over the past 4 or 5 years, we have just seen a massive blast in innovation on the technology side and the tools that are available. I'm sure what you were using back in 2018 doesn't even stack up remotely to what's out there on the market today. And it's an exciting time, I imagine.
Yeah, and it's exciting as an event organizer, as a brand, right? The things that we can now do in a virtual event, thanks to the technology, the ways that we can reach new audiences and keep them engaged. It's fascinating. It's exciting. All the fun things are going on right now. And I love that out of such a horrible thing like the pandemic, there's still these lights that we can look to, these moments of inspiration and innovation that, there is a silver lining, right? We were forced to do this, and now something wonderful has happened. We can create truly immersive, engaging experiences where people can actually meet other people and talk to other people, and it's not just boring talking head webinar type stuff that we're all tired of and exhausted from. So
yes. So let's dive into that. What I've seen here at FeedLoop is obviously there was the big boom, everyone transitioning to virtual at the start of the pandemic. And then I'd say this year, a switch was flipped and we're seeing a lot of people want to go back to in-person, face-to-face meetings. And while this is great, I love on-site events, I think there still is a place and time for the virtual format. And I know you agree with that. You regularly tout it as not only a viable format, but probably the best format for a lot of different event options. Can you outline why that is, Mike? Like, what are the strengths of the virtual event format, and when might this be a better fit than an in-person gathering?
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with what you just said. I love in-person events. I was telling you, before we started the recording, I was just at an in-person event days ago. I was speaking at Social Media Day San Diego, and I love that. I'm going to be in Cleveland later this year. I'm going to be in Suriname later this year. There's always going to be a place for in-person events. But right off the bat, the immediate drawback, and this is not new to an in-person event, is that it requires the individual attendee to be able to travel to and afford to travel to that remote space, which is one of the big benefits of putting on a virtual event. With a virtual event, you can reach a global audience at a much more convenient and timely affair. So that's a huge benefit to virtual that's not going to change. Now, there's always the hybrid approach, which is also a viable approach where you've got an in-person element and a virtual element. And one of the things that I love, again, about the technology that has evolved and continues to evolve right now is that it makes putting on a hybrid event much more feasible than before. If you go back 2 years ago, in-person events that had a virtual component, those were very much separated. And so if you were participating in the event virtually, you certainly didn't feel like you were at the event. And you certainly knew that there were things the in-person people were able to do that you simply couldn't do. Most of the time that meant the virtual, all you could do is via the internet stream the presentations. So you got to watch the content. And that was it. There wasn't any networking or engagement or anything
Not very fun.
But I was talking... No, not very fun. That's right. You weren't meeting people. You weren't having the magical moments that I like to talk about where you're actually having conversations and then something happens as a result of that conversation, which as an event planner, we can't create. All we can do is make the space for those things to happen.
Right.
So today, there's more that's happening. Today, there's engagement that's taking place through virtual rooms and breakout sessions and that sort of thing. There's conversations that are happening, sometimes even between the in-person and the virtual attendees. The other thing that I often talk about for brands who want to put on they want to put on an event. Mm-hmm. And to put on an in-person event, there are additional logistics that have to be considered. Your venue, your catering, security, and now, thanks to the pandemic, health concerns, which have to be taken into consideration and addressed in some way. And the unfortunate looming threat that we're not technically out of the pandemic yet, which means there's always the possibility for at least the next 6 months, I think, that something could occur locally, wherever it is that you are, that would force you to change the nature, the scope, the timing, the availability of that in-person event. In other words, and I don't mean to say this in a fear factor way, this is just the truth, you might have to postpone or shut down your in-person venue through no fault of your own. That's not a concern virtually. If we're going to put on a virtual event, there's still some logistics, of course. We have to have the platform, we have to have the promotion, that sort of thing. But I don't have to reserve a venue, which is typically a higher cost. I don't have to handle catering. I don't have to worry about health concerns. And then there's also the final point, which is that today, most people want a virtual option. Like you and I, they want that in-person component, they want the idea, but they know that their own circumstances might change. They might contract COVID. Their flights might get canceled. Something else might come up, which is not new. Things that, people have been missing events and having to change their travel plans for years. So now that we've had such a explosion of virtual event technology and capability, and people are used to working from home, they're used to attending things remotely, they're like, I'm okay with the virtual. I want to see my friends. I want to meet new people, but I'm okay with virtual, and I'd like to have that option. 70% of attendees want that option, and that's not going to change. As you mentioned at the outset of the question, there's definitely a renewed desire for in-person because so many of us have been locked up for 2 years. We need to get out of the house. We want to be able to travel again. We want the magic and mystique of being able to go to new places and meet new people face to face.
Amen.
But we want that comfort and security of virtual.
Yeah, it's really about having that option there, I think, because at this point, it has been the norm. And if you, as the event planner, decide that you're not going to offer that option, then you may unfortunately be alienating some people who would have otherwise attended the event, gotten value out of it, networked with your partners, your sponsors, etc.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right on. So we could talk about virtual events for a very long time. I know you've got a lot to share on that, but I do want to take a step away from virtual events and just look at events in general. I've listened to a few of your podcast episodes, and on many of the episodes comes up the importance of identifying your why. So as the event planner, you say it's very important for you to identify and define the why behind your event as the very first step. Mike, can you expand on what you mean by this, identifying the why behind your event?
Yeah, as we're creating events, there will be a constant influx of questions and decisions that need to be made. We just talked through one of them. Basically, should my event be in-person, virtual, or hybrid?
Yep.
And it is impossible to answer those questions with any degree of certainty if you don't know why you're hosting your event in the first place. If you haven't really thought that through and identified, why are we doing this? What are we hoping to accomplish? What are our actual objectives and goals? At the end of the end, what do we want to have accomplished? If we haven't figured that out, it's so much harder to answer all these other questions correctly, right? Otherwise, I'm just guessing. Like if you tell me, okay, Mike, I'm having an event tomorrow. Should it be virtual, hybrid, or in person? Well, I can give you a laundry list of pros and cons for every single one of those.
Yep.
And then it's just guessing which ones are going to apply and help you make that decision. But if we know that at the end of the day, what we really want to do is increase our brand awareness around the globe, that is the number one thing that we want to accomplish with our event. Increase brand awareness. Well, does it need to be in person? Does having an in-person event really impact that decision? I would probably argue no, it doesn't. Does hybrid? Yeah, probably not. But if virtual, we know that can reach a global audience. Everybody around the world could potentially attend a virtual audience. Maybe it needs to be virtual. So that helps me answer that question. That helps me drive the correct course towards achieving that goal. And when it comes to putting on an event, whether it's in-person, virtual, or hybrid, there are 1,000 decisions that need to be made, small and large. There's entire Asana projects with 1 billion different subtasks. All of them have decisions that have to be made. And if we know our why, it makes it so much easier to answer all of those questions. What kinds of speakers are we going to bring in? What's the format? What's the agenda going to look at? What platform are we going to use? That's a really important decision that's got to be made. That's probably going to be one of the most impactful, one of the largest investments that you're going to make. What platform we use? It's an important decision. If we don't know why we're putting on the event in the first place, how do you make that choice?
Right.
With any kind of reasonable degree of success. And then we have to think about, how long should the event last? Should there be a charge? Is it going to be free, or is there going to be a ticket or multiple tickets? Do we have sponsors? What does that look like? These are all things that are so much easier once you've thought about that why. So there's an exercise I have people go through where they just simply think about, what are we trying to accomplish? Who are we trying to reach? What are we hoping that they will, the attendee, what does their journey look like? What will they hopefully accomplish by the end of that event? And we document that. It's something I might spend an hour talking to a client through. And so people are like, wait, it takes me an hour to figure this out? Yes. You need to go through this exercise and devote some time to thinking this through so that you can actually build out a plan for your event that starts with knowing the end in mind. I was talking to an attendee once, and I said, okay, so why are we hosting an event? Why are we here? Well, I want leads and sales. Okay. That makes sense. That's great. Ads can drive leads, right? Emails can convert those leads into sales. You could hire an SDR. Why an event? Why an event? So I pushed him, and we had to have a kind of a deeper conversation. And then he finally said to me, I want to make friends. And it's like, wait, what? You want to make friends. That's why you're looking at spending $10,000 on a virtual event, so that you can make friends. So then we had to pull that apart, right? And unpack what that really meant. And it was just his way of saying he wanted to create connections. He wanted to foster relationships for his business. He wanted to create partnership opportunities for his business. And it was like, okay, That's amazing. That's a great reason to do an event, for one. And it also helps understand, okay, if that's one of the most important objectives for your event, the relationships that you personally, he was the owner of an organization, that you personally will gain out of hosting that event, that helps drive so many other decisions.
Right.
For instance, you could choose to have a master of ceremonies, you can choose who's going to speak and that sort of thing. But if your number one goal is to drive personal relationships, that means that you personally have to be extremely prominent, front and center. You personally should be speaking at, keynoting the master ceremonies, the host, something like that, where you're visible, highly, highly visible. You can't pass that off to somebody else, because then you're not making relationships. Nobody knows who you are. So that's why we have those conversations, so that we can figure that out right from the start and then drive the rest of the decisions.
Okay. All right. This is really important. So I just want to take a moment to regurgitate this back to you, because I want the audience to take this away. So what you're saying here is that the smart event planner will take the time to identify the why behind their event and outline an overall event strategy before diving into the basic event planning steps, such as deciding on format, building out the program, selecting your event technology, and so forth. So the absolute first step you should be taking when planning your event is identify the why. As you mentioned, sometimes after identifying that why, you may come to the conclusion that, hey, maybe an event isn't the best way to do this. Maybe I just spend money on ads, or I hire an SDR. But it all is anchored around defining and identifying the why behind the event, correct?
That's absolutely correct. And I say this from personal experience after having not done it that way. Time after time after again. If people go to my site, thesocialmediahat.com, that's my blog. I've had it for over 10 years. And so much of that content is based on what I've done wrong, and finally figured out, oh, you know what? I shouldn't have been doing it that way. And then I share that lesson. And this is another example of that first virtual event that I did in 2018. We didn't start with the why. We started with the resource. I happened to have 10 to 15 or 20 influencers who were ambassadors for our brand to tap as experts. That's what we started with. I started with the fact that I happened to have a webinar technology platform that I could have used. And that's what we started with. I didn't think about the why. I didn't think about, okay, what are we trying to accomplish here? Who are we trying to reach? I didn't have those conversations or thoughts or an exercise to determine that back then. So we just threw this thing together. And then we did that a couple more times, and then I started to realize I'm not really achieving anything, because I hadn't determined what I wanted to achieve other than just raw registrations. That's just a number, right? What do we want to really accomplish? So take that time.
Yeah. And I got to say, I commend you for that approach. Sure, people like hearing about this is me putting on an event and it went really, really well for these reasons. But personally, I learn more out of hearing about people's failures. It's tough for you to do that and come out and highlight, hey, I did this and this is why it was wrong, but this is why this is a learning lesson from it. And this is how you can apply that in your life and in your role and in your work. So it's a tough position to take, but it's a really valuable position to take, and it's something I've seen you highlight on a number of your own episodes in the blog. Is just, these are failures I've had in the past, and this is how you, my audience, can learn from them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, in addition to identifying the why, I know you've also written some content on the importance of getting specific with your event and narrowing down on an audience and a topic. Why is that?
Yeah, again, this was a lesson drawn from failure, or at least not as much success as we would have liked. Again, that first event, the topic of the event was not decided in advance. We had those influencers. And they were all experts in their niche. Jeff Bullis, for instance, is an expert blogger. Donna Moritz is an expert at visual marketing. Ian Cleary is an expert at content marketing. I tapped them because they were already our ambassadors and experts, and I let them choose the topics that were of interest to them. Basically, presentations that they were comfortable giving, talks that they were comfortable giving. That's what drove that first event. And the successive events after that were very similar. There was no cohesive theme. There was no target audience. There definitely was not a focus for those events. So they could have been viewed as successful. They were successful in some respects. But when I recognized that we weren't focused in who we were trying to reach and what we were trying to accomplish, and I changed the format of the event from just this broad online marketing, I called them social success summits, but it was really anything. It could be social media, content marketing, influencer marketing, email marketing. It didn't really matter to me. When I recognized that wasn't a great approach, and I changed, and I said, hey, let's have a conference strictly about LinkedIn. We're only going to be targeting social media managers who want to know how to use LinkedIn better on behalf of their brands. And I'm only going to work with experts in LinkedIn, people like Judy Fox and Melody Dodaro and AJ Wilcox, who could come in and deliver really powerful pieces of content about that platform. We went from 1,000 or so attendees to 4,000 attendees. Wow. With, no more, ad spend or, no other real major difference. We weren't reaching huge new audiences, but we honed our focus. And that allowed us to not only build an event with content that was very, very specific, but it also helped us hone our messaging. And this is why I often laugh at myself, because I've been a marketer for over a decade, and I should know the core precepts of marketing, and yet I still find myself making the same dumb mistakes over and over again. And this is one of them, right? If we are super focused in what we're talking about and who we're talking to, it empowers us to speak to those people in a way that's going to actually resonate with them. And if we're just speaking broadly, we're speaking to everybody in the world. Yes, everybody can benefit from what I'm offering. Well, then I'm not speaking to anybody. Because the reality is not everybody can benefit from what I'm offering. The reality is only a super select number of people actually need and will be interested in what it is that I have to say right now. So if I focus my target on those specific people, this is why building personas and having avatars for your target audience and that sort of thing are so important from a marketing perspective, because it allows us to craft copy, imagery, content, format, style in a way that's going to appeal and resonate with those people. You can say something in a social post, on a landing page, and so on, that kind of an individual is going to say, oh, okay, yeah, he's talking to me.
Yeah.
So fast forward another year to last year, I decided instead of doing another Social Pulse Summit on a specific network, because we did LinkedIn, we did Twitter, we did Instagram, so I probably could have done Facebook or YouTube next. We decided to shift gears again, and I hosted Agency Summit. This was for specifically marketing agencies, owners and technicians of marketing agencies.
And this was at Agorapulse, right?
Right. This is for Agorapulse. Yeah, these are all events for Agorapulse.
Yep.
And I said things like, when was the last time you took a vacation from your business? When was the last time you allowed yourself to take time off and let the people in your agency do their jobs and run their agency? And for agency owners around the world, they felt that. I mean, they felt that in their core, because for many of them, it had literally been years since they took a single day off, because they're so busy working in their business. They don't have time to work on their business or on themselves. So they're not growing their agencies. They're not scaling their agencies. They're in the weeds and they can't see out of it. They can't get their way out of it. So we put on an event to help them do just that. Here's how to grow and scale your business so that you can actually take a vacation, right? Yep. You can actually spend time on your family. You can have people in your business that are working on your business, and actually, instead of making $1 million a year, you can hit $100 million a year and see some real success. That resonated because I knew who we were talking to, and I knew, more importantly, the actual pain that they were going through. And some of the times that means before you get into planning the event. And for everybody listening, this is true for products. This is true for marketing campaigns. This is true for new businesses. Identify who you want to talk to, and then literally go and talk to them. Have focus groups, have surveys, have one-on-one discovery calls, and find out what it is that they're actually struggling with, and how do they talk about those struggles. We actually asked our agency customers, we had thousands of agency customers at Agorapulse, what are you struggling with today? It's just an open-ended question. And most of them said, I'm struggling with how to scale my agency. Okay, great. Now we knew that they were doing that. We knew that they were struggling with that. We knew that was a pain point, and we knew how they talked about it. They didn't say, I'm struggling with how to make $10 million, or I'm struggling with how to hire more people. They didn't really say it that way. I want to scale. I want to grow. So now if you look at our landing pages, if you look at our social copy, if you look at our email marketing, we're using that same language back to them to reach them. So that's the second step that we go through, that I go through. Well, I go through it internally. Anytime I'm planning a new event, I'm going to have an e-commerce summit later this year in Q4, right? I'm going to go through the same exercise when I do that. But I also go through this exercise with clients. If I'm on a call with them, we do like a VIP strategy day where we'll spend like 4 hours going through all these steps. And that second step is, who are we talking to? What are they struggling with? How do you know that they're struggling with that? And if you don't know, if you haven't gone through that discovery, right, of actually talking to them, well, then that's the next thing that you have to do. That's the homework you've got to take home. And
go out and talk to them.
Have those conversations. Go out and talk to them. It's a lean startup approach, really, right? It's taking that. We have a product, call it an event if you want, but we've got a product that we want to bring to market. That means there has to be a market there for us to talk to. And so you might even go through a lean canvas approach for those who have studied, lean startup methodology, where you identify, what's your unique selling point? Who are you trying to target? What are their strengths, weaknesses? What are their pain points and challenges? What's the rest of the market look like right now, today, that's helping them address that? Who are they turning to, or what are they turning to today to resolve those challenges, and how can you help them uniquely? It's a super powerful exercise to go through, because at the end, some people initially are like, oh man, aren't I limiting my audience now, right? Instead of just talking to anybody who wants to learn about online marketing, I'm only talking to marketing agencies, and I'm not talking to social media managers who have full-time jobs. That might feel scary, and rephrase what I just said to, if you're listening, to whoever your target audiences are for your business. But at the end of the day, instead of having just broad language that may or may not appeal to somebody individually, it's mediocre. You're going to get mediocre results. You get highly focused language targeting a very specific people that energizes them. Like I keep using that word, resonates. It resonates. They feel it. They see it. And they know that you're talking to them. And because they know that you're talking to them in an ad, in a social post, in an email newsletter, they're going to be much more likely to click through to that landing page where you're continuing to talk to them. And then they're going to convert into a registrant, right? Because they see through the building out of that event, through the speakers that you've selected, the content that you selected, the structure that you've built around it. Yeah, this is for me. I can actually benefit from this. I can look at your event and I can see that I'm going to take something out of it, which is the other mistake that I often make. And I see myself doing it recently. It's the last agency summit, which is I talk to features instead of benefits. I talk about how many speakers are going to be at this amazing event, and how many sessions we're going to have, and how many other attendees are going to have. And I forget that as an individual, because these things are important to me as the event producer, right? Or as the brand who's putting this on. Those are important things. But as the attendee, I don't care. I don't care how many other attendees. I mean, I guess I don't want to be the only one there, but I don't really care. I don't care how many sessions. I don't care how many speakers. I want to know at the end of the day, what's it going to do for me? How is your event going to move the needle in my business?
Yes.
How are you going to help me fix what's wrong or address those challenges, whatever those might be. For those of you listening, again, put your own business hat on for the moment. Who are you trying to talk to? What are you trying to solve for? Right? So then if you're going to put on an event, how is that event going to help the people that you're trying to help solve for those issues? If I'm trying to reach agency owners, I need to help them understand, we're going to help you scale your business. I'm going to put you in front of a RevOps expert and a guy who's been there and done that with agencies, who coaches agencies, and he's going to show you a framework that you can apply to your business tomorrow that's going to help you grow that agency and take yourself out of it so that you can go on a vacation. Those are the kinds of things that I need to do a better job of speaking to. And again, once you figured out the why and the who, it makes it so much easier to address those points.
Wow. That was a lot. A lot of really good content there, a lot of really good points. And that last point, it's interesting. I had Lindsay Carroll from Robin Hood, a nonprofit in New York aimed at helping to fight poverty in New York, on the podcast a few weeks ago. And one of the points she brought up was the importance of what she calls humanizing the event experience. So again, understanding the why, understanding the who, and ultimately tailoring the experience to that audience. I think this relates to what you're saying is you're not always trying to cast the widest net possible. And in most cases for an event, that's not the best approach. Instead, to create a stickier, more attractive event, you want to narrow down on very targeted topics, messaging, and sure, you may be narrowing down your audience to a smaller group of people, but that group is going to be much more engaged, much more attracted, and likely to come back to the event year after year and engage with your brand going forward. So I think that's a really, really important point to highlight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned the net because for those of us listening who are in the sales world, we're used to metaphors like nets and spears, right? When we're going after targeted accounts, right? And you can use this wide net, and that's going to bring in some mice and some rabbits, right? But if you want to bring down an elk or an elephant or a whale, in sales, we have all these animal analogies for larger and larger clients and more desirable clients, right? You want to bring down that elephant, you need a spear, and that's not going to do it. And that's a great analogy because it's a great use for events. If you have a highly targeted event, you can use that as a spear, and you can put it in front of those elephants and whales that you're targeting for your business, the customers and the clients that are going to spend a lot more money. They're going to be with you for a long, long time. So that lifetime value is a much, much higher amount. Yeah. You can put that event in front of them and say, hey, we'd love to make you our VIP attendee at this event, give you some face-to-face time with these speakers. That's something new that I'm adding to events is VIP Q&A times with key speakers. That's cool. People really appreciate that. It's a great thing to add. And I'm going to be able to give that to my sales team and say, okay, guys, next time you're talking to, a whale, give them a free VIP pass to this event we've got coming up in 30 days and make them feel special. And, unfortunately, the event is designed to help them. It's not just, a VIP pass to nothing. It's a highly curated, focused event. Very effective for sales.
Amazing. Love it. So if you don't mind, Mike, being the technology nerd that I am, I always try to see whether we can loop the podcast conversation back to event technology. So what we've discussed today is the importance of identifying your why, the importance of identifying your who, and narrowing down on a specific value proposition, specific messaging that appeals to that who. Can you speak to how identifying the why and the who behind an event then plays into which event tech solution will be the best fit for the organizer?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one of the next steps. After we've got the why and the who we're trying to reach, and we've thought about budget because that's an important consideration, right?
Of course.
Now we're talking about an expenditure and an investment. I love to think about the platform because then we're going to talk about what the format of the event could potentially look like. And I do that next. And again, this is very contrary to how I used to run events. I started with the agenda. That was the first thing I built in 2018. Here's my agenda. Donna Moritz, Ian Cleary, Jeff Bullis, and so on.
Yep.
And that was a mistake. I do that later in the process now. And I let the why and the who and the platform help dictate what the agenda looks like.
Interesting.
Because some platforms are strong in one area and other platforms are stronger in other areas. And that's great, because then you can choose a platform that's going to help you accomplish your goals. And then you can build the agenda around the strengths of the platform. So if delivering amazing content is what you're trying to accomplish, and you want to have multiple sessions and multiple tracks and that sort of thing, well, that's great. Then you can have a platform that does that. But if your why and your who is kind of revolving around this idea of networking, and it's really about bringing people together and allowing them to have conversations, well, then you can make sure that you're selecting a platform where that's the strong suit.
Yep.
If the whole purpose of your event is to show off other technology, your tool and other tools, you want a virtual trade show, that's the point of the event, to have a virtual trade show, then you select an event that's really ideally suited to that. Food Loop's got wonderful options and opportunities to service these kinds of events, so that you can have your why and your who in place, and you can have the platform in place. And then you can start to create the entire event experience. And you can start to make decisions of, okay, now that we know what we're going to do here, let's decide that we're going to have opening, closing keynotes and some breakout sessions. And over here is going to be a virtual trade show. And it's going to be this augmented reality kind of a thing. And people can walk around and they can go up to booths and they can learn about all of our partners and our solutions. It's not possible to do that well if you make those decisions and then try to go shopping for a platform.
Right.
It's going to be a lot harder.
Because then you're going to have this idea of the event in your mind, find a platform, and then realize, oh, no, we can't do X, Y, Z on the program. And you're just going to be searching for a very long time. Yeah,
and you're going to be looking for workarounds and other kinds of cobbled together solutions, or making sacrifices and limiting parts of the vision that you already took the time to create. So that's why I try to eliminate that kind of issue and determine that platform earlier on in the process.
Okay. All right. So we've got the why, we've got the who, we've then got the platform that helps us lead into and build out the program, the where, et cetera. Are there any other final tips you'd like to leave for the audience today? I know we've taken up a lot of your time, Mike, and this is actually so far the longest recording we've had. I've had a lot of fun. This has been a really, really exciting conversation. But for the audience, any other actionable tips that you can share today?
Yeah, I would say, to kind of stem from the why discussion, the implication there is that you're going to have that discussion, that you're going to take that time to think about your why, that you're going to document it, and that's going to be part of a virtual plan, which means there is a virtual plan. There must be a virtual plan. There must be a document or an Asana project or something that outlines every single thing that you're going to accomplish. I do kind of prefer Asana. I used to do all this in Evernote. I would just have this giant, massive note.
Yep.
And the problem with that is it just becomes a massive list of to-do items, which can be overwhelming. And I like using Asana. I've leaned into it. I kind of pushed back at first because there's another tool that I was not comfortable with. But once I got into it, I was, okay, I can organize my virtual event plan and all the things that have to happen. Because like I said at the outset, there's a lot of things that have to happen. And I can organize them into tasks and subtasks and projects. And if I have a team, I can assign those things. If I don't have a team, okay, well, that's all on me. But at least I can see them, I can drill down, and I can prioritize. And it's super important to keep organized and keep on top of everything. And by the way, one last tip I'll mention is that I know some of the people who are listening are probably feeling very overwhelmed because they don't have a team. And if that's you, let me push back on that idea for a moment. Because even though you may not necessarily have people in your organization working for you that you could delegate tasks to, maybe there are people in the organization who can do other things for you. Maybe they have nothing to do with the virtual event, but maybe there's other things that they could take off of your plate to free up some of your time. And if you don't have that, maybe you're a solopreneur trying to put on an event for your industry, and I applaud you for doing that. But as a solopreneur, there is nobody else. It's all on you. Maybe there are people outside of your work that can help you, friends, family that you can lean on and say, hey, Mitch, I've got this huge event that I'm putting on next month. I don't expect you to help me with the event, but is there anything else you can do to help me? You know, if it's family, can they do some of the more chores around the house? Can they handle picking up the kids and dropping them off? Can they pick up some of the slack when it comes to meals? That would give you more time in the day to focus on this big project that you have coming up. And it's important to have that conversation with them, whether you want them to help you or not. Having that conversation today will help them understand what you're doing, because an event is a major undertaking. And the closer you get to your event, the more stressed you're going to be and the more overwhelmed you're going to be. And if you have that conversation today with the friends and family who are in your life, that will help them be prepared to help you, that will help them be prepared to deal with you when you have those moments of anxiety and you might accidentally lash out at the people who are close to you. They will know what's going on in your life, and they can be more respectful and more understanding, more helpful, and give you the grace that you need. So look for the help that is there. You have options.
Love it. Life advice on the Where People Meet podcast. That's fantastic, Mike. Amazing. Well, absolutely. I've learned a lot from you today. I've learned a lot from following you on LinkedIn and social media and the blog. But for our audience, I'm guessing a lot of people will want to follow along with your journey, stay up to date with everything that you're doing. Where is the best place for them to do so, Mike?
Yeah, the socialmediahat.com is home base for me. All the content lives there. Definitely, please subscribe and leave a review if you like the Virtual Event Strategist podcast. It's on Apple, Spotify, Google, all of them.
Amazing. And we'll share all of that in the show notes as well. But Mike, again, just really want to say thank you so much. I had it was a really exciting conversation. I learned a lot in this, and I know the audience is going to derive tremendous value. So thank you for your time, Mike. And to everyone in the audience, that wraps up our Where People Meet podcast episode on the importance of identifying your why when planning your next event with the wonderful, knowledgeable, powerful Mike Allton. Thanks for your time today, and we'll see you next time on the Where People Meet podcast.